Every team needs to start with a goal. This team decided to have a goal of $1 million per year. That's the annual revenue of their business. Then they need to have a problem. So the team got together and they thought about some problems, and one of the team members said that he needed to print something the other day, but he doesn't own a printer. This was the huckster, and both the hipster and the hacker really liked this idea, and they agreed that it was a problem that they wanted to solve. So the first thing they do is they realize that they need to come up with a plan. So they think of this in terms of 3 years, 3 months, and 3 weeks away. Now they're going to be using the lean canvas and a traction model for the 3-year plan. For 3 months, they're going to think of a 90-day goal and identify the riskiest assumptions, and then they're going to do 3-week sprints in between. So first thing the team does from there is they split up and they each make their own lean canvas. Now, when the team meets up an hour later, they realize that the hacker and the hustler have come up with pretty much the exact same business idea. So they decide to split up again, and each one is going to make a new lean canvas. So now the team has 5 lean canvases, not bad for half a day of work. Each member of the team reads all 5 canvases, and they get together again to meet. The team decides to eliminate one of the canvases because it would involve a big government contract, and they just didn't think that would be very feasible for the team. The other variants, however, did look like something that would be feasible for the team. So they run a traction roadmap calculation for each of the 4 variants. At this point, they realize that the calculations for the first variant is not going to be very feasible. Next, they do a 3-month plan. The first thing they do is they set out with an objective to achieve product solution fit. And in order to do that, they realize that they need to start X amount of customer trials. Now, this number is going to come from their traction roadmap. They also realize that the customers are going to have to accept a certain pricing each month, and that they need to have a conversion rate of 80%. Now, as you see here, this 80% is a lot higher than what they put in their traction roadmap. They were thinking around 1% conversion rate. But remember, they're going to be speaking with customers in person, and they should be able to convert customers at a much higher rate because they're going to be speaking with them one-on-one and giving a lot more information, as well as narrowing down their customers a lot more. So from here, they're going to identify their 3 riskiest assumptions. Now, these are the riskiest assumptions that they saw at that time. First of all, that their problem assumptions were wrong, that existing solutions could get the job done, and that customers weren't willing to pay more than X amount of dollars, which is way below what they actually need in order to make their goals, according to the traction roadmap. So from there, they come up with their validation plans. Validation plans are basically their method for testing out these riskiest assumptions. So this is sprint 1. They decide they need to understand and define, and this goes back to the problem solution fit. Understand the problem, define the solution. So potential customer interviews used to be over here, now it's moved over here. And this is what they've come up with. So they believe that the customer has a problem with X, and that's because they've heard some anecdotal stories that people were having problems with printing and they were going to the library twice a week. This was the impetus for the business idea. So they decided to perform 25 potential customer interviews, and they're going to define the customer qualifications and hopefully define a mafia offer at the end of this. Their proposal is they're going to go to a place where they can find lots of these potential customers. So they go ahead, they do all of these interviews, they come back at the end of the sprint and they have some analysis. Maybe they figured out how the customer sees the problem, or their top other alternatives that they consider, or the most common triggers. These are all important things that can come from customer interviews. And as a follow-on, they decide that they might need to go interview more customers, or if they feel like they've done enough interviews and they really understand the problem well, then they can start putting together a Mafia offer. For this example, we're going to say that they really understand the problem well and they're moving forward. So remember, they started out with 5 canvases. In sprint 1, with these customer interviews, we're going to assume that one of these customer segments just didn't really seem to have much of a problem. But for variants 3 and 5, the team learned that they needed to make some updates to the canvases. For example, they could have learned that the more existing alternatives to add to their canvas, and perhaps that they could have charged additional fees for additional work. The team is ready for their second sprint, and this is the sprint where they're going to start testing the offer. So, as you can see here, use the Mafia offer, used to be over here, now it's moved to sprint 2. And they each go away and make their own experiment ideas. So they each make 2 experiment reports for the 2 remaining canvases, and that would only be what you see on the left side of the screen here. So they write those up themselves, they get back together as a team, and then they decide which one to choose for each of those 2 canvases. In this case, they chose the hacker's plans because it was based more on the evidence from the customer interviews. So they decided to move forward with those 2 experiments. Now, at the end of those 2 weeks, they get back together, they review their results, and they realize that they don't really know what to do with the second or the 5th variant here. This one involved working with larger corporations that have entire teams that need to sign off on the product. And their interviewees kept saying that their boss and marketing manager would also have to approve before signing an LOI. They got only 1 LOI, which is 1/10 of what they needed, but half of the participants did say, well, I'd be happy to connect you with my boss and the marketing manager, and then later did so. The team wasn't really sure whether that was should be considered as successful or not, because then they got 1 LOI despite all of these fulfilled commitments, and so they decided to just give it up, but they weren't really sure if that was the right choice. Now, for the 3rd variant, things went a lot better. They came within 30% of making their goal, and 50% of the participants signed an LOI, as well as providing phone numbers and emails. So, at this point, the team felt comfortable to define an MVP for their 3rd variant, and unfortunately, they felt like they couldn't really provide any value until they built a website, which they thought could be built over the next sprint. And so during the next sprint, 2 of the members were tasked with building the MVP, while the 3rd member was tasked with trying a new variant of the offer, with the goal of getting 80% conversion this time.